So hello and very warm welcome to all of you joining us from around the world. My name is Barbara Sosic and I'm curator for rural economy at the Slovene Ethnographic Museum in Ljubljana, Slovenia, which is a country known for its outstanding beekeeping practices. We'll hear more about this later. I also serve as vice president of AIMA, the International Association of Agricultural Museums, and with lectures like today's, we contribute to celebration of international days dedicated to agricultural themes, their traditions, and also innovations. Unfortunately, today, I'm a president, Mr. Kraus Krop, the scientific manager of the Lauersam Opera Museum for Experimental Archaeology in Germany, is unable to join us today, but he sends his best wishes for a successful event. And I'm very honored to guide you through today's lecture titled Bees at the Heart of Agriculture, Sustaining Food, Biodiversity and Heritage. So World Bee Day, celebrated today, is a global initiative inspired by Slovenian beekeepers. And today, as nature flourishes, as we said before, in the Northern Hemisphere, and harvests ripen on the Southern, we are reminded of the vital role pollinators play in sustaining food, biodiversity, and our shared heritage. And as we know, bees and other pollinators are essential to life on Earth. It is often said that 1/3 of the world's production, food production, depends on them. We'll hear more about these figures later. So honeybees in particular hold a special place in our awareness of ecosystems and cultural traditions because we are closely connected. They are closely connected to humans. And in many parts of the world, they wouldn't survive without our support. Today, we'll explore how this deep connection between beekeeping and agriculture plays out across different continents. We'll start in Slovenia, go to Austria, Argentina, and back to India. So we have 4 outstanding speakers with us. Each will present for around 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll finish with a short discussion. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll collect them for the closing discussion. So I kindly ask you to keep your microphones muted during the presentations. And warm welcome again to everyone. And let's start with our first speaker. This is Assistant Professor Maja Ivana Smodiš-Kerer from Slovenia. She is a researcher at the Agricultural Institute of Slovenia and also teacher at the Beekeeping Academy of Slovenia and the University of Primorska. Today, she will highlight how Slovenia's long-standing tradition of seasonal hive migration, moving bees across different landscapes, is still very much alive, requires profound knowledge and expertise, and contributes to both honey diversity and food crop pollination. So Maja, the floor is yours.
Hello. Did you know that in Slovenia, 1 in every 200 people is a registered beekeeper? That's over 10,000 beekeepers in a country of just 2 million. And many of them are on the move, literally. Bee migration is deeply woven into Slovenia's rural traditions. So moving hives isn't just for show, it's actually a practice rooted in ecological adaptation and honey production. In this presentation, we will explore how Slovenian beekeepers follow the nectar trail, how the legal and practical aspects support this tradition, and what this can teach others about responsible beekeeping. Beekeeping has been a way of life in Slovenia for centuries, and the Corniolan bee, native to this region, is known worldwide for its gentle behavior, for strong resilience to diseases, and excellent foraging abilities. And Slovenians are proud of this bee, and for a good reason. It's the first subspecies in the European Union protected by law. The reverence for bees extends into education and culture. Many children grow up with family apiaries, and beekeeping is even integrated in some school curricula. In 2017, Slovenia proposed and succeeded in establishing World Bee Day on May 20th, this is today, which is the birthday of Anton Janša, the pioneer of modern beekeeping and a Slovenian icon. So to Slovenians, beekeeping isn't just production, it's heritage, science, and stewardships rolled into one. But why do beekeepers actually move their bees? The answer is simple. They want to follow the flowers, and different plants actually bloom at different times and altitudes. Staying in one place would mean missing out on key nectar flows and honeydew. This is especially true in Slovenia because we have a varied terrain from coastal plains to alpine meadows. So moving hives actually helps beekeepers match the bees' foraging period with peak nectar availability. This means higher yields and more diverse honey types like acacia, linden, chestnut, and the rare and highly prized fir honey. But it's not just about profit. As climate change shifts blooming patterns and alters traditional forage cycles, mobility becomes a strategy for resilience. So beekeepers use transport to mitigate weather risk, to improve colony strengths, and to respond to regional variations in flowering conditions. Slovenian bee pastures follow a seasonal sequence. So in May, acacia trees bloom, also maple tree is in full bloom, and by June the spruce forests of the hills are in full swing. Chestnut flowers in early July, and while linden blossoms mark the season's peak in many valleys. And then there's fir honey, an oddity among honeys. It's made not from nectar but from honeydew excreted by insects which are feeding on fir trees. It's aromatic, dark, and mineral-rich. So this diversity in floral sources makes Slovenia a perfect candidate for pasture migration. Each region has a role in the honey calendar. Beekeepers spend years learning where and where to go, based on microclimates, based on insect activity and historical yield patterns. So here is the timing very delicate. If you miss the bloom by a week, you can miss the entire harvest. But of course, you can just pick up your hives and just drive into the woods. In Slovenia, the practice is regulated by the pasture cadastre system. It was established in 2013 and ensures that pastures are fairly distributed, that are environmentally suitable and not overcrowded. Beekeepers must therefore submit a request at least 30 days before the transport, including the number of colonies. They have to insert precise location and have a signed agreement from the landowner. And permits are then usually processed within 15 days. Minimum distances between apiary must be also respected, both to avoid competition and to prevent disease spread. So local beekeeping associations play a key role in mediating access, checking site conditions, and issuing approvals. So this formal framework ensures that pasture migration remains safe and cooperative. Transporting bees is both a logistical and biological challenge. Colonies must be strong and healthy, and ideally with balanced brood, with enough food reserves and enough workers ready to forage. So in preparation, beekeepers often reverse brood frames to stimulate spring development and strengthen the colony. So hive entrances are closed at dusk when all foragers have returned, And here the ventilation is very critical. So some use mesh bottoms or modify hive covers, and each hive is trapped down, and movement is done at night or early in the morning to avoid overheating and bee losses. There are even several transport methods, but most common are the specialized bee trucks with pre-mounted hives. Some advanced setups use mobile platforms that can be lifted by tandem trailers, allowing fast on-site deployment without disturbing the bees. All this is done under the watchful eye of veterinary regulations, so health certificates must be posted at the pasture site. In a real-world experience we have from Slovenian beekeepers, which we can show how much planning is involved. And one of the beekeepers even described how he prepared his colonies for transport weeks in advance. So he had to prepare the colony by removing old combs, to monitor the buildup of young bees. So the transport unit carries actually different number of hives and can be towed by a car with a tandem trailer. The beekeepers move colonies only when the bloom is confirmed and weather conditions are right. Even with all the care, success is not always guaranteed. Sometimes they say the stationary bees at home collect even more honey than those moved to the pasture. It's therefore a calculated risk, one that actually blends tradition, instinct, and modern observation. Innovation has made its way into Slovenian beekeeping too. So today, 55 hives are monitored with digital scales that measure yield. So the observation and forecasting service based at the Beekeeping Center in Lukovica prepares data and advises to the beekeepers about how to plan feeding, how to plan transport or harvest. Next thing, queen bees can be tracked using QR codes which provide information about lineage and age. The queens are documented in a so-called herd book for Carniolan bee, which is led by the Agricultural Institute of Slovenia. And we also have a very strong veterinary support, which is led by National Veterinary Institute, University of Ljubljana. But bee migration must also be ethical. Overstocking a site can stress bees. It can reduce yields for all and harm local flora. So stationary beekeepers may feel crowded or displaced if mobile hives are brought in without communication. So Slovenian guidelines emphasize cooperation. So beekeepers are encouraged to scout sites early, to discuss with neighbors, and to report any overuse or misuse. Environmental protection is also part of this equation. So migrating bees must not endanger wild pollinators or fragile ecosystems. Transport should minimize stress. It should avoid peak heat to ensure ventilation and choose routes with fewer delays. All contribute to animal welfare. So sustainable migration is actually balance to the productivity with including ecological responsibility. In conclusion, Slovenia's system of bee pasture transport shows how a small country can make a big impact through thoughtful regulation, through tradition-based knowledge and modern adaptation. So it's not just about chasing honey, it's about working together with nature, with community and science. So for other countries, Slovenia offers a nice model of cooperation and sustainability. And for beekeepers, it's a reminder that mobility, when it's done right, can lead to healthier bee colonies and better harvests. So if you are thinking about taking your hives on the road, prepare well, communicate clearly, and always respect that flowers and bees are also there, very important part of your way to the harvest. So thank you very much for your attention. And as Slovenian beekeepers always greet, Naj medi, may there be a good honey flow.
Yeah. So thank you, Maya, for this rich insight into Slovenia's beekeeping legacy and innovation. And our next speaker is Dr. Michael Rubinik from Graz, Austria. He has over 15 years of experience in beekeeping on European scale as a trainer, bee health expert, and industry representative. He runs a commercial beekeeping operation, but also leads a company focused on information technology. And today he will share insight from his latest work at the Pollinator Hub, which collects vital data on pollinators. Michael will help us understand just how dependent we truly are on pollinators and what is commonly believed and what the research's data actually tell us. So, Michael, please go ahead.
Dear Barbara, thank you for inviting me to this seminar and for the kind introduction. You have asked me to perform a brief analysis of the economic value of insect pollination, and here are the results of my analysis. Here is our working hypothesis. One of these phrases that you might have heard and read in different versions and different contexts with different numbers, which is every third spoonful of food depends on bees and other pollinators. And this is what we're going to test now. The data that I used for this analysis comes from a data hub which has been developed by a consortium led by the European organization BeeLife, in which I have been involved as a data scientist and which was sponsored by the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA. The original data source was the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, FAO, Eurostat, and the biannual reports on the honey market issued by the European Commission. For practical reasons, I limited this analysis to the European Union, but it might, of course, also be done on a worldwide scale. By the way, scientific studies that have carried out such analysis for the whole world come to pretty much the same conclusion as I did. A rather sober look at the production data already shows that our hypothesis is highly unlikely to be correct. It is true that, at least in Central Europe, about 3/4 of flowering plants require pollination by animals, almost exclusively insects, and only about 1/4 depends on wind pollination. But the mix of plants that we mainly feed on is somewhat different. Here, plants that depend on wind pollination, like cereals, grapes, or olives, dominate. Also plants that may even be pollinated by animals, but whose yield does not depend on pollination because we do not consume the fruits, but completely different parts of the plant make up a large part. For example, in the EU, 17% of the total production quantity of crops expressed in tons is wheat, 11% is corn, 18% is sugar beet, and 8% are potatoes. An even closer look on plant biology reveals the next problem in our hypothesis. Even crop species that depend on pollination by animals hardly ever depend completely on pollination by animals. There are rare cases, at least among the crop species such as pumpkins, whose yield is 100% dependent on cross-pollination by animals. But for most crop species that we are feeding on, this percentage is much lower, either because the plants may to some extent also be pollinated by wind, or because they are self-pollinators, or because they do not require pollination at all in order to set fruits. So, if we perform an analysis on the crops that have been produced in the EU from 1961 to 2023, we see that the average share of crop yield that depends on insect pollination, expressed as a percentage of tons of total crop production, ranged between 4 and 6%, with a slight increase over the past 60 years, probably because people rely less on cereals and buy more fruit simply because they can afford it. Instead of taking the quantity of production, we can also use the economic value of production. Here we see a slightly different picture. The economic value of crop production that goes on the account of pollination by insects from 1991 to 2023 was pretty stable, around 9 to 10% of the total economic value of crops produced in the EU, with the blue dots representing the average and the vertical lines the maximum and minimum estimate. Let us now break down these figures and look at which plants make a larger and which a smaller contribution to this considerable economic value. In this chart, we can see that in the EU, apples are the big players, accounting for, on the average, 22% of the economic value of total insect pollination in the past 5 years, from 2019 to 23, followed by rapeseed with 12%, cucumbers with 8%, peaches and nectarines with 7%, sunflower seeds with 6%, pears with 5%, pumpkins, watermelons, cherries, strawberries and tomatoes with 4%, raspberries with 3%, and the rest is 17%. There are, of course, differences between EU member states, as the mix of crops that are produced varies between the different climatic and agricultural zones. In countries in the south of the EU, such as Portugal, Cyprus or Greece, the percentage of the economic value of crop production is much higher than in the north of the EU, like Ireland, Denmark or Sweden, simply because they produce relatively more crops such as cereals, sugar beet or potatoes that do not require insect pollinations, as we have learned at the beginning of this lecture. But also countries in the more central part of the EU, like France or Germany, that produce a lot of cereals, are at the lower end of this scale. We can look at this data from yet another point of view. What is the ratio of honeybees kept in the different member states to the total area of crops that require pollination by insects and usually produce nectar to attract insect pollinators? Of course, there is neither a constant rate of nectar yield by these plants that would allow an estimate of crop area to honey production, nor is there a constant rate of beehives required for pollination of the different crop species. And of course, you can't assume that the bee colonies pollinating a particular crop are actually in the vicinity of that crop. It is intended more as a suggestion to look at the data from this point of view. Analysis of this type might provide a rough overview on the potential for beekeeping in the different regions. In this graph, you see the ratio between the number of beehives kept in each of the 27 EU member states and the total area of crops whose yield depends for at least 1% on insect pollination. The horizontal blue bar covers the range of 2 to 4 beehives per hectare, a number that for many crops is considered sufficient to assure optimal pollination by honeybee colonies. Here we see that apart from one outlier, Slovenia, The number of hives in many member states is within this hypothetical range, while in some member states there might be potential for growth as far as the number of honeybee colonies is concerned. A factor that, of course, depends also on the price of honey on the market, which is currently dangerously low. I cannot really explain the outlier of Slovenia. Either they are highly overgrazing the landscape with bees, or the reported numbers, either for the number of beehives or for the crops, are wrong. So, to wrap this up, based on the numbers provided by Eurostat, the total value of crop production in the EU in 2023 was approximately 274 billion euros. Assuming a rate of approximately 9% for the value of insect pollination, this means that we can conclude that the economic value of insect pollination in the EU in 2023 was about 26 billion euros. That means that overall, in terms of economic value, every 10th rather than every 3rd spoonful of food depends on bees and other insect pollinators. Okay, that was it. I thank you much for your attention, and I wish you a pleasant World Bee Day. Goodbye.
So thank you very much, Michael, for this inspiring and quite thought-provoking, but data-driven overview. Yeah, so we now move to South America. Dr. Soledad Villamil is an entomologist at the Laboratory for Beekeeping Studies, LABEA, Department of Agronomy, National University of the South in Argentina. She'll introduce the work of her lab and their research on bees and other beneficial insects with a special focus on their role in pollination and sustainable agriculture, as well as their efforts to share this knowledge with diverse audiences. So Dr. Soledad Villamil, the screen is yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. So I would like to thank Barbara and her team for inviting me to share this lecture with you, or this time with you, just to celebrate the World Bee Day 2025. In order to do that, I will let you know a little bit of what we do in my lab and how we try to work for and with the bees in trying to achieve sustainability in our crops and also a healthier food system. So my name is Soledad Villamil, and I work at the Laboratorio de Estudios Apícolas, which we call LABEA. It's in the Department of Agronomy at the Universidad Nacional del Sur, and I also work for the Comisión de Investigaciones Científicas de la Provincia de Buenos Aires, which is a governmental organization that funds research. Argentina is a honey-producing country that exports most of its honey. For some reason, we are not really big consumers of honey ourselves, but we do export a lot of our honey. So it wouldn't be strange if you find Argentinian honey in Europe, in different parts of Europe. You probably will if you look on the labels. Argentina is in the south of South America, and that arrow there points to my city, Bahía Blanca, so you can see we're kind of in the middle and of the city of the country, and we live in a temperate zone, but in my area specifically, it's semi-arid, so it's actually kind of dry. In Argentina, we have over 1,100 species of bees. And I say this, I want to make a statement of this, because in general, we talk about bees, and when we talk about bees, we think about the Western honeybee, which is only one of all these species of bees. And I told you that we have 1,100 in Argentina, but actually in the world, there are over 20,000 species of bees. So that's a lot of bees. And most species of bees are actually solitary species, which is very different from the honeybee, because the honeybee is social, and only 10% of bee species are social, which means that they live in societies like the honeybee. They live in a colony, in a group of very big number of animals that live all together. And that is actually kind of special about honeybees and some other bees. But it's not the norm for the whole of bees. Because it's Bee World today, I'm going to tell you what we do with bees in our lab. And our lab works especially or specifically with honeybees, but we do have some work with other bees. Our team is pretty big, and we always have influx of people and output of people too. So for teaching, most of us do teach because we are at the university, and we teach courses about bees or beekeeping. So you can see us in the field, and we do have labs, and we do have field trips where we go and look at the places where they once we harvest the honey, they extract the honey from the combs, and that way they can we can sell it later on. So those are the photos you're seeing right there. We also have the requirement of a final work to graduate. And so you can see here some of the pictures of the people that choose our lab to work with us and to do their final project. And these are only a few of the students that we have had recently. So the themes that they work on are related to bees, but they're not always specifically about honeybees, for example. And I will talk about this in just a minute. So regarding research, for example, we have bee pollen composition and quality. Pollen is one of the products of the hive that, besides honey, that we can work on. And Leticia Fernandez and Liliana Galé are the ones that work on this particular topic. So they look at the quality of pollen, not only as a nutrition for bees, but also as for human consumption. Then we have Irene Sibanal, who studies the antifungal effects of propolis and oil essences, and she uses that to treat plant pathogens. So what she will do with these is that she will try to, or she's studying how to apply these on the seeds, for example, so that when they sprout, then you have fungus-free seeds or plants. Propolis is also one of the products of the beehive, and it's something the bees use for example, for sealing crevices, and also they use it to clean the combs once the larva turns into an adult. The adult leaves, and then they have to clean that out in order to lay another egg and start the cycle again. So this is one of the uses of propolis in the hive. Maria Agustina Rodriguez and Matias Ledesma, they work on bee nutrition. So Agustina is trying to develop a nutritional supplement with probiotic potential, and that will help the health on bees, the bee health. And Matias looks at the use of food resources through digestibility assay. So he's trying to figure out which kinds of foods bees can digest easier or better, and they end up giving them more nutrition. And so that's what he works on. Another two students, these are doctoral students, but another two students that we have, so these are graduate students, are Victoria Fernandez Echegaray, and she works on apicultural products in poultry feed. So she is studying how pollen and honey would work or would function as a supplement in poultry feed. And so she measures what that does to the poultry, if it grows better quality, and also regarding health in poultry. And Leticia Fernandez is studying honeybees, Apis mellifera honeybee, and also other native pollinators, if we can use them as biomonitors of agricultural systems. Because the bees and other insects move around in the environment, they can pick up a lot of different pesticides, for example, and they take them back to the hive. And then the hive can also keep them in the hive, and they would be on the wax in the hive, or maybe in the honey, or maybe in the pollen. So she will be looking at what matrices might be better to measure this kind of thing. Another of the work lines that we have are floral rewards for crop pollination. Floral rewards are the rewards that the bees receive for going to the flower. So those would be, the most common ones are pollen and nectar, which they in turn use to feed their larvae in the hive. So in this case, what you're looking at is sunflower, and we need the bees to pollinate the sunflower. And for achieving that, what we need is a bee to go to a flower that has some kind of reward, like nectar or pollen. And when she goes in there and she starts working, she will carry the nectar inside her, but she will also carry pollen on her body. And when she goes to the next flower, that pollen will transfer, and that's how she will fertilize the next flower. So these are the rewards that are important for pollination. And those were Cecilia Pellegrini and Gisela Grandinetti, the people who work on that topic. My specific topic is crop pollination, and I work with Luciano Marinosi. And so we have been working with crop pollination for a few years now, and we've worked on different crops, like, for example, red clover and rapeseed and alfalfa, lucerne, and tomato. And what you can see here is these are all crops that are worked here in Argentina, and you can see that we're not the people who are going to eat alfalfa or red clover, but we do need the pollination of these crops because this is what we feed the animals with, and once we feed this animal feed that we will later use, or in turn we will eat it as beef or other meat. So bees are also important for these kinds of crops. At the moment, we are working on a squash that's very similar to zucchini. The shape is different, but the way it works is very similar. And so what happens here is we try to measure different things in the pollination studies. So what we look at is how much pollen a bee carries on her body, whether it be a honeybee or some other species of bee. How much pollen is deposited on the female flower structure. The pollen is the male part that is needed for pollination, and the stigma is the female part of the flower that receives the pollen. We also look at how long a single visit lasts for a honeybee and also for the other bees. So basically how much time they spend working on the flower. And we also look at how much pollen male flowers produce, how much nectar male flowers produce, and how much nectar female flowers produce. In this plant in particular, we have some flowers that are male and some flowers that are female. And only the male flowers will produce pollen. So those are some of the rewards that I was talking about earlier. So the other people study the rewards in particular, but we look at all this together. We do work together, obviously. Regarding the fruit production, once the fertilization of the flower happens, then we can get the fruit production. So the fruit comes after the fertilization. But what we look at is what percentage of flowers produce fruit, the size and the weight of the fruit. And depending on the kind of crop, we can also figure out the number and the weight of the seeds. But this is when the fruit are harvested after maturity. In the case of squash, we harvest it when it's not mature yet, so we cannot do that kind of measurement, or at least not that easily. So I'm showing you here some pictures of what we do in the field. And so what you can see on the top left is a honeybee covered in pollen. And in the middle top, you can see a lot of bees inside these flowers, because these flowers are actually really big flowers. And so they can have a lot of honeybees. They produce a lot of nectar, and they can have several honeybees feeding at the same time. On the top right, you can see somebody's hand. That's Luciano's, and you can see that he has a bee on his hand, but that is not a honeybee. That is one of the native bees, but it is also covered in pollen. So she also works on the flower and pollinates. What you see on the bottom left is a flower that hasn't opened yet, and you can see that it's covered with a bag. And what we do with this is we make sure that nothing goes inside that flower before it opens. And when we go to the field, we open the flower, and then is when we can measure how long a honeybee takes to work inside the flower. So we figure out when she comes in, when she works, how long she works, and when she leaves. And then we cover up that flower again. What you can see at the bottom of that flower is the ovary, which is what is going to turn into the fruit. And the petals are the ones that are closed like a cone. And then after a certain amount of time, we go and collect the fruit. So we have some bags that are always closed. Those are what we call restricted pollination. So there's no insect getting there. We have partial pollination where we go and we put the bag on, but then the next day we open it, we figure out who goes in there, like is it a honeybee or is it a different kind of bee? And then once that bee leaves, we close it up again so nobody else can get the flower. So we know that that is a single visit by a single bee. And then finally, we have free pollination, where there is no bag on it so that any insect can get to it. And probably a lot of insects will go in and out of that flower. It will be very much pollinated. It will have a lot of pollen get to it. And you can see there on the bottom right that this is the result of that kind of work. When you have restricted pollination, you do not get any fruit. When you have partial pollination, you get some fruit that are not very nice, not even just the ovary of the flower. And then finally, you have free pollination, which has a very big fruit. So obviously, they do need insect pollination. And all of these things that we have been talking about are what we try to take out to everybody, not only in the university, but everywhere else. So we do a lot of what is called extension, where we tell people about what we do in the lab and explain to them how it works. So that is how we tell them, yes, we work on crops, and we need to work on crops because a lot of crops need insect pollination, and the honeybee is one of the most important pollinators in the world. And we also try to explain to them that honeybees only sting if you bother them, and you don't need to be afraid of them if you're not bothering them. That's something very hard to explain to little kids in kindergarten, but we try to get through to them, and we try to explain all of that. We also think that bees are important in the whole world, and as I said before, they are important in many, many crops. There are many crops that do not need insect pollination, but the ones we work on are the ones that do need insect pollination. In Argentina, some of those big crops that we have a lot of are fruits like apples, pears, peaches and plums and that kind of thing. And then there are a lot of horticultural crops like I showed you before, the squash and tomato and cucumbers. There are many, many crops that cannot produce fruit if they do not have the pollinators. So that's why it's very important to keep them. And not only for crops, because bees also are the ones that help in the pollination or assist in the pollination of native plants, which we also need to have. So bees definitely are important in our environment, and for our food system definitely so too, directly and indirectly, like in the pollination of forage for animals. So with that, I will end my talk. I will thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation again, and you have my contact information if you were to have any more questions or would like to be in contact with me. So thank you.
Thank you, Soledad, for presenting the important work being carried out in Argentina, also to support pollination and, of course, to help us better understand its connection to crop yields. And our final speaker is Ms. Namrata Khanna from New Delhi, India. She is a director of the India Honey Alliance. With her deep expertise in honey and pollination, she will speak about historic importance of bees, bee products, and India's incredibly diverse honey sector, covering traditional crops and the challenges facing pollinators in India today. So, Namrata, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara. And it's, of course, an absolute pleasure to listen to everyone here. And there was so much of knowledge exchange today that my mind is actually spinning a little bit with the thoughts of the kind of stuff that we can really do in India?
Like I said, my mind is actually spinning with the kind of thoughts that I have and the things that I've learned today in these 25, 30 odd minutes. And I hope I can add some value. Now, in India, our world is very different, very, very different. It's a colorful world, so you will find my presentation to be very colorful. If I start rattling on, please just raise your hands, and I promise you I'll shut up there and then. But as a country, we have very different situations and challenges as compared to any of the rest of the world. If I talk about the way I want to run this presentation today, about how ancient beliefs and mythology has affected Indian beekeeping, the kind of cultural significances that we have. Importance of pollinators, I would not even dare to touch, because the kind of experts that we've just heard, I don't think I want to go down that path right now. So I will stick to the challenges in my country, the kind of growing need that we have for urban beekeeping, and a call to action in terms of being humane and looking at bees as they really are and understanding their values as much as we possibly can. Right, for some of the beliefs. Now, the beliefs that I can talk about internationally and in various countries, if we see, the Egyptian world, the Greek mythology, the Bible, all of these have had huge mentions of bees across the years. Interestingly, let me tell you a little bit about the Indian thing. I'm not sure how many of you know, but the Quran has a clear mention of the bees in one of the early chapters as well, about the value of honey that they're supposed to be having. In the Indian system that we have, we've got our mythology deeply rooted in bees and honey. In fact, some of our forests are called madhubans. So for some of you who may have heard of it or not, madhu in India, in the Hindi language, in the Indian language, means honey. And the ban means it's a forest. So it's a forest where honey is collected, and it's abundant. So that's one of the ways of calling a forest. And it's only on those forests where there is a huge amount of flowering. And this has been used down the years. The other interesting thing is, just please raise your hands if how many of you have heard of Krishna, Lord Krishna. In the Indian context, you may have, some of you would have heard. But so one of the names of Lord Krishna is also based on honey. It is called Madhavan. Or, so Madhav again means it's a derivative of honey. So we've got a very deep and a very old connection with honey. In fact, how many of you have done yoga? Some of you may have heard of yoga as the activity that a lot of people do to keep their health going, etc., etc. Now, in yoga, there is a particular way of breathing. It's a breathing exercise, which is talking about the way the buzzing is, which emulates the buzzing of a bee. And you're supposed to close your ears. You're supposed to breathe in such a manner that only you can just hear that buzz in your ears. And it's supposed to be not just therapeutic. It's supposed to be very, very good for the nerve cells of the brain. It keeps the memory alive, and it keeps all the cells very active. So we've got a very old connection with this. Like I said, historical figures across the world, in Egypt, in Greece, in England. The interesting fact, number 5 here, is that in England, a ritual is known as telling the bees, which involved the notifying honeybees of major events in a beekeeper's life, as death or a birth. The harvesting of, in Spanish caves, it's more than 8,000 years old. So most of the world, and in fact, in India, one of the words that we use for mead is methu, which is again very similar to a lot of words in different parts of the world. So while having said all of these things, even though we have a very, very deep connection, unfortunately, the pollination, understanding of the level of pollination, the kind of data that you had presented, the number of flowers, the plants, etc., which get pollinated, and the economic impact of the pollinators, this kind of data is still missing in India, in spite of the fact that we are a very large and a diverse country, and practically honey production is done across the length and breadth of India. The kind of fruits that you've already spoken about, all of you know that, so I really don't want to go down repeating that information again. We have vegetables, we have spice crops, we have nuts and seeds, and estimated bee colonies in India are about 34 lakhs. Now, I say estimated because we have an Indian regulator called, not regulator, it's a statutory kind of a body called the National Bee Board. But because the country is diverse, and because the entire system in our country is completely fragmented as far as honeybees and bee pollination and the beekeepers are concerned, it is a big challenge to collect authentic data. With the result that whatever data is there is an estimate. It's in pockets. So basis that, in spite of that, we still have this data that we have over about 34 lakh colonies here. The estimated honey production, again, is about, it has gone up to about 1,40,000 metric tons. And India is the third largest exporter of honey into the world, with the primary countries being Canada, US, the Middle East, then some other places as well, especially in some of it also goes to Australia, believe it or not. The kind of beekeepers, the number of beekeepers that we have is again estimated. It's about 2.5 lakh beekeepers, which translates into millions, 2.5 million. And but we have a lot more who are unaccounted for, and that does cause a big issue for our country, because the data collection is a challenge. With the result, the policies, the regulatory framework, the testing mechanism, and various other factors which allow for better system of apiculture is left wanting. What is the Indian perspective currently? The Prime Minister, having said that, has got a vision of something called Madhu Kranti. Now, this may sound like a mouthful, but Kranti means revolution in India. And like I said, Madhu is another word for honey, and it's turned into a sweet revolution. Like I spoke about the National Bee Board and the various agricultural universities, which have been working very extensively on apiculture. And they have done a lot of very good work. Punjab agriculture is there, the one that you've attended in Solan. We have in Kashmir, some of you may have heard of the Kashmir part of India, which is right up north. And the acacia honey, which is similar to what some of you get in Slovenia and other countries, we have those trees as well. And it is considered one of the premium honeys. We also have a dedicated Central Bee Research Technology Institutes in Pune, and that's around the central part of India, which does a lot of work on this area. However, again, like I said, and we do look towards various countries for assistance and for support in terms of knowledge of how to create that culture where the beekeepers learn in a scientific manner and produce mature honey and do not pilferage is the only word I can think of, the food of the poor honeybees. Honey is also offered to deities in the cultural and the religious symbols. Therefore, it holds a huge primary importance in our lives. Interestingly, let me tell you an interesting fact. Okay, well, before I do that, let me just tell you, we have also tried to build a culture of beekeeping. There are certain bee parks which are in India, in the central part, as well as some up north. But the requirement to have many more of those is very critical. The honey that we use, and I'm speaking more of honey, is because that is the one product which is utilized and understood in India from beekeeping extensively as compared to any other product. With the result that is what takes the place of pride. Honey is fed to a baby as soon as a baby is born. A little bit is put on their tongue. When someone dies and passes on into the next world, honey is again put in their mouths because it helps their passage into the other world. it represents a special kind of drink. People use honey and yogurt together, and where it's been given to bridegrooms and to brides, because it's a very traditional standard mixture in India, where a lot of people from the Western world do find it a little strange because they use it as their dressings and things. But this is how we use honey on a regular feature. So coming back to the Indian perspective, it's not all about the cultural understanding, the connection of honey that we have. We do have certain challenges, like every other country. However, our challenges, because of the length and breadth and the size of our country and the sheer size of our population, makes it so much more. Having said that, the government is doing a fair amount of work trying to beat some of these challenges. And we, as the industry body, are also trying our bit. We are fairly new, we're just about 4 years old in this world. But yes, we have tied up with technical institutes. We have tied up with the government a great deal. We have tied up with some of the other people, with the various government bodies to try and build a strong value chain and an ecosystem for them. One of the things that some of you spoke about is that bees are often misunderstood. They are considered as pests and people are a little afraid of them. In India, in urban beekeeping, there is nothing called urban beekeeping in India. That concept does not exist. And it needs to, because we have beehives all over our country, in the homes, wherever nooks and crannies, wherever the bees find space within the flowering season, they create their beehives. And unfortunately, a lot of people tend to think, oh my God, these guys are going to kill us. They're going to bite us. They're coming into the homes. And that fear is put into kids as well. And my heart breaks every time that I see pesticide being thrown at those bees, harmful chemicals, and they die by the thousands, by the hundreds. And it is so tragic that I have not had words to express that anguish at times, thinking that we have willfully, because of lack of understanding and awareness, willfully robbed someone of their homes, and in a country which talks about live and let live. And that is the tragedy of India. The lack of awareness of their level of pollination, the kind of economic impact it has, impact on agriculture, while the farmers understand. And in a lot of places in India, what they have done is a lot of farmers have actually allowed beekeepers to just keep their bee boxes out there free of cost. Some places they charge them, but most places they leave them free of cost. That has increased agricultural produce in those regions, anything between 20 to about 60%. And these are all documented and they are facts. People have looked at them and seen how to develop this more. But again, these are in pockets, in places like Punjab, like in Haryana, the central places where the land is very fertile and there is huge amount of flowering. Mustard plants in India it's a huge crop here. Huge crop. Again, while they give brilliant mustard honey, none of the mustard honey, not even a drop, is consumed in India. All of it is exported outside. Every drop, it is used either as ingredients in Canadian dishes, or in America, they use it as a mix. Some places, they also eat it as creamy honey, as a spread, but it's not really used in India at all. The other issue with some of this problem is that the GMO created product for the mustard fields, the fields have gone down a little bit because of the use of pesticides, the kind of changes of weather, the kind of different types of problems in the soil. The fields, which used to be about 6 feet high, have now reduced to about 4 feet, 3.5, 4 feet in India, which is a real pity. Another thing, what is required in India is a complete and a total study of Indian honey. Because of the kind of varieties that we have a known at least 250 to 300 varieties of honey. Those are known. The unknown ones, the local honeys, maybe more. We do not have a single full-fledged study conducted on Indian honey. So that when we talk about, and why I'm bringing this up again is when we talk about testing, when we talk about creating a database, when about understanding the kind of honeys, we talk of Manuka honey, which is famous across the world. We talk of acacia honey. There is something called the Sundarban honey in India, which is towards the West Bengal. That is dark forest honey. It is one of the most challenging places in the world, and I challenge anyone across the world to come and extract honey from there. Tigers maul the beekeepers. They take their entire half the face away because that place is infested with tigers, and it is one of the best honeys in the world. It has been proved to have a geographical indication for that particular area. It is premium honey, difficult to get by, yet the beekeepers enter that place and they get their honey. So these kind of challenges are huge here. Once a study is created, testing mechanisms are so much simpler. We understand what sort of database is here, why that, and basis that database, where do we match the standards along with Codex, with the world standards, with some of the European standards, with some of the ones which are particular for tropical areas. The other technical challenge that Indian honey faces is HMF, the hydromethyl furfural, which most of you as technical people would be knowing. I only learned it about 4 or 5 years ago when I joined this area. And I realized what a huge issue it is in India. Because of our rising temperatures, we have ambient temperature of about 48 degrees centigrade. And you can imagine what that is, because it means, like when I said, if you come to India right now, you will probably burn to a crisp. I wasn't joking. We can actually fry eggs on top of car bonnets. It's that hot. It's that hot. You cannot touch a piece of iron outside if it's been lying outside, because your hand will you will just recoil with that heat. So I'm talking of 50 degrees centigrade. The ambient temperature is 48 degrees. After 35 degrees, HMF in honey starts rising. The storage issues in India are huge. With the result, when HMF rises, it's a quality standard. We have, again, lab issues here because there is no parity. The understanding of honey as a product and as with all its peculiarities needs to be really worked on. And that's what at least India Honey Alliance is trying to work in that area. We are now going to be working very soon on how to create a really good white paper, a full-fledged study on Indian honey. We are pushing the government very hard that let's have an interministerial meeting, because regulatory challenges are the same all over the world, whether the country is for 2 million population or 200,000 million population, or whatever the case may be. But, and those are the kind of things that we are trying to fix, I would say, or at least try to bridge the gap. We are trying also to get a good gap assessment study in India to understand, like I said, standards, and based on that, education programs. A huge issue is myth busting for Indian people. Lack of awareness. People have so many myths. Let me tell you an interesting one. There is one which says, I don't know if all of you have heard of this or not, that if a dog licks honey, then it's considered to be impure because they don't lick honey. So it's stuff like that, which is totally bizarre, which has no basis in any kind of logic. But these are the kind of myths that we need to dispel. Myths like dark honey is not as good as light colored honey. Thick honey is not as good as thin, viscous honey. The sticky honey, if it sticks within your fingers, it's okay. That means there's more sugar. If it just kind of spreads a little bit, it's pure. And we all know that honey is one of the 3 most adulterated products in the world, regardless of where it comes from. These are challenges that we all have. But I'm hoping that in India, we are trying to inculcate and have some introduction of apiculture courses. We're trying to set up bee parks in educational institutes. We have already created 6 videos on the most prevalent myths in India on honey. The other challenge that we face, and I'm sorry to be sounding like I'm whining on and on and on, whinging and whining about challenges in India, but these are facts. We have wonderful areas out here. We have some brilliantly knowledgeable people who know so much about honey and the bees because they work with them on ground in those areas where people will not even think of venturing in very difficult climatic conditions. So to be thankful to the beekeepers and to this world of bees is the least that in my mind we can do. Urban beekeeping is something that we need to do to really promote that educational work for normal people so that honey becomes a table food in India and across the world as well. Bee themed installations is something we can do. I'm sure they're there in your countries, but in here, we are trying to promote more and more of that. And that's what we are hoping to do. And the buzzing of the bees is something which is considered rather romantic in India. You know, and there are lots of songs which have been made, nice romantic stuff with the gardens and a couple is roaming around and there's buzzing of the bees and all of that. Having said all of that, there is still so much of fear in urban minds that it's a, and when I just looked at that video, at that photograph a little while ago of those little kids in kindergarten dressed up as little bees and learning about bees, it was so beautiful because I've been thinking that why is it that we don't just put in something like that in India? And that's something that we are trying to be. So there's loads of work that we need to do. And urban awareness, we've already spoken about it, hive destruction, promoting bee. This is what we really, at least I'm from my mindset, and the people that I have around me are trying to push. And this is where I'm very glad that I got this opportunity today to speak to all of you and learn so much more from you and try and apply some of that here. And maybe, who knows, in the future, in the very near future, we can even collaborate and get some more information from you to be able to do this. These are some of the natural stuff that we use in India, you know, to make sure that the bees stay away from the plants and people are not that scared. However, cinnamon is an expensive product in India, and so is other stuff. So, but these are small tips that we keep telling people, and some of them use it, and it's a nice thing to do, rather than throw them away, rather than put antiseptic or that awful chemical stuff on them, pesticides, to get rid of them. Be humane is what we are trying, and we are just hoping that more and more people come up for us, more and more regulations happen, that IHA can work a little bit more towards this to create a campaign. Today itself, we have launched a campaign, which is a social media campaign, and will carry on for the next 5-6 days. I know my presentation is a little off the topic in terms of pollination and the value, but honestly, in India, we don't have the data. We just don't have the data of the economic impact. So I cannot give it. I do not have the data of how much value pollination puts into Indian agriculture. So I cannot share that with you. But yes, I can share whatever I have and whatever we need to do and whatever we are trying to do. So I am thankful, and I wish we all can be thankful, and that's going to be a part of our campaign. My email is here, my phone number is here, and I'm happy to share any information that you may want further. While we have a large country, we have a large amount of work to do. So thank you so much for calling me here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Namrata. It was very, very interesting and very different. We can see how diverse the whole world is regarding beekeeping. So thank you, all speakers. I'm very thankful. Also, for your very insightful presentations. But now we are a bit late, but still we can move to short discussion. And there already was one question. Let me see. Pierre Del Porto asked Maya from Slovenia if she can give some figures for honey production, numbers of hives, and so on. And Maya, you can also answer directly so that everyone can hear it.
Yes, thank you, Barbara, for answering. So Pierre was asking, yes, about production. So based on data that we have actually very a high number of hives, one could think that we could produce very much honey each year, but these figures vary. So from very low honey production to a bit better ones. So some official data from 2 years ago tell us that we produce 285 tons of honey. So we also have export of honey, let's say, something like over 300 tons, but we need to import much more because the consumption is higher than, we eat a lot more honey than we actually produce each year. And because we have some very bad years, then we have less our honey, and yeah, the consumption is quite high. So the demands are as they are, and unfortunately we have to import a lot of honey.
So thank you, Maya.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there is also a comment by Alejandra Bonifacio. Namrata Kana, that is quite a statement in your presentation. I celebrate your dedication and message. I would like to get in touch with you. Greetings from Germany. That's very nice. I would love to, okay. So in India, do beekeepers harvest honey from feral colonies as well as from maintained hives? Yeah, they do. Both are used extensively.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there some other questions maybe from the audience? Direct questions, not in chat? Can I ask a question to all speakers? I was wondering what you see as the greatest opportunity for innovation. Well, Namrata mentioned several things, but still for innovation in beekeeping today that still honors traditional knowledge. Maybe
Yes.
Yes. Also other speakers, I don't know, maybe Soledad, what do you think?
Well, I have a slight problem to answer there because I myself am not a beekeeper. But I can talk a little bit about what I know from the others. And I know there are some people online here that might be able to answer better than myself. One of the things that we are working on, well, we have already worked with a cooperative, is on an organic acaricide against Varroa. So I think that was a very big move, and I think that we should kind of go in that way, in the sense trying to not contaminate in a terrible way, and maybe using more safer things. But I don't know if I'm the one to go about new stuff in beekeeping in particular, because I don't work in that.
So maybe Michael has some ideas.
Oh, Well, beekeepers per se are very innovative, and sometimes these folks are too innovative, so they try out too much. But I think in terms of beekeeping products, hive products, there's always space for new innovations. I'm always surprised to see how innovative people are, and sometimes they bring on the market things that have long been forgotten and have been produced, I don't know, right after the war or between the wars. If you read all these old journals, beekeeping journals, you find sometimes things that have long been forgotten, and they bring them up. And there, I think there's always room for innovation. And as I said, beekeepers are very innovative. So I'm always very surprised with things they come up with. There's there is space for definitely space for innovation.
Well, I was quite shocked when you at your presentation, still this myth about three every third spoon, but what do you think about the impact for the feed of animals? Not direct food, but feed for animals, as Soledad mentions, also seed production. Is this also a part of this calculation you presented?
Oh, this is a very rough calculation. It's based on scientific data. And you could actually, Namrata said that you couldn't calculate that for India, but you could actually calculate that for India, because this scientific publication actually considered all products that are listed by FAO. So I did not distinguish between crop produced for human consumption and for animal feed, because I think FAO does not distinguish between animal feed and human consumption. And seed production, as far as I know, doesn't appear anywhere in the FAO statistics. Of course, there are some indeed some crops or plants that need for seed production need honeybees, but this does not appear, as far as I know, in the FAO statistics. So this is mainly food production for human consumption plus animals, but for animals you have got mainly barley and maybe lupins, and barley. Neither barley nor lupins really rely on insects for pollination, so that would fall out again. And that's probably the most important. These are the most important crops that are used for animal feed, as far as I remember. Yeah.
So I see there are no more questions. Thank you, Michael. And that brings us to the end of our lecture today. Big thank you to our speakers for your time, for your expertise, and of course for your passion, and to all you who joined us from near and far. So today's lecture has shown us the bees and not just pollinators. They are not just pollinators, they are connections of cultures, natures, agriculture, and heritage. And we hope to leave you with new ideas. So the lecture recording will be available on AIMA homepage and on our YouTube channel, as all our lectures are. So until next time, take care and keep supporting bees and other pollinators. And for those who want to have some questions and further discussions, are warmly invited. If Sven is still there, maybe we can have another discussion later when the recording is finished. Thank you, everyone, and have a happy bee day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good.
Give me